The great hall of the Galactic Combat Federation buzzed with excitement. Thousands of alien beings filled the massive space, their different forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had 4 arms, others had no arms at all. Some breathed air, others floated in tanks of liquid. But they all came here for the same reason: to watch the greatest fighters in the galaxy compete. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform where the Federation Council sat. These were the leaders of the strongest warrior races in known space. They had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years through combat trials. Whoever won the annual tournament got to control entire star systems. The losers went home with nothing. Commander Zektar of the Kitharan Empire leaned back in his crystal chair. His forearms crossed over his chest as he watched the crowd below. The Kitharans had won the last 100 tournaments. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could not be broken. Their punches could crush steel. No one had ever beaten them in single combat. Next to him sat High Priestess Silandra of the Vashti Collective. Her snake-like body coiled around her seat as her forked tongue tasted the air. The Vashti were master poisoners. One bite from their fangs could kill a creature the size of a building. They had held second place in the tournament for 50 years. On the other side of the platform floated Bright Death Dancing, a being made of pure energy. The luminals could become invisible, walk through walls, and strike from inside their enemies' bodies. They were feared across a dozen star systems. These 3 races, along with 7 others, made up the strongest fighters the galaxy had ever known. Each tournament they battled to see who was the greatest. The winner got to expand their territory and grow stronger. The cycle had continued for millennia. That's why everyone was surprised when the humans asked to join. A small ship had arrived at the Federation capital 3 months ago. It looked simple compared to the bioships of the Kitharans or the crystal vessels of the luminals. When it docked, 5 creatures stepped out that made the entire council laugh. They called themselves humans. They were small, soft-looking beings with pale pink skin. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs. Their bones looked fragile. Their muscles seemed weak. They had no visible armor, no energy shields, no obvious weapons. They looked like they would break if someone sneezed on them too hard. The human leader introduced herself as Sarah Chen. She was a middle-aged woman with short black hair and calm eyes. She spoke in a clear voice as she addressed the council. "We wish to join the Galactic Combat Federation," she said simply. The hall erupted in laughter. Beings from across the galaxy pointed at the humans and made sounds of amusement. Some aliens actually fell out of their seats, they were laughing so hard. Commander Zektar raised one of his crystal hands for silence. When the noise died down, he looked at Sarah Chen with something close to pity. "Little creature," he said, his voice echoing like breaking glass. "Do you understand what you are asking? This is not a game. Warriors die in our tournaments. The weakest beings we allow to compete could tear apart your entire ship with their bare hands." Sarah Chen nodded. "We understand the risks." High Priestess Silandra slithered forward on her platform. "Your species appears to have no special abilities. No armor plating, no energy manipulation, no enhanced strength. What could you possibly offer in combat?" "We offer ourselves," Sarah replied. 5 fighters who represent our species." Bright Death Dancing's energy form pulsed with what might have been laughter. "Your homeworld records show you come from a moderate gravity planet. Your technology is basic. Your physiology is unremarkable. You would not survive the first round against our weakest competitors." Sarah Chen's expression didn't change. "Perhaps, but we still wish to try." The council members looked at each other. This was unprecedented. No species this weak had ever asked to join the Federation. Usually, only races that had already conquered several star systems were allowed to compete. Commander Zektar leaned forward. "If you lose, when you lose, your species forfeits all rights to expand beyond your home system. You will remain trapped on your single world forever. Do you accept these terms?" "We accept," Sarah said without hesitation. The other human fighters stood behind her in silence. There was a young man who kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. An older woman who seemed to be chewing something. A large man with dark skin who smiled easily. A small Asian woman who appeared to be sleeping while standing up. And behind them all, a scarred man with gray eyes who watched everything but said nothing. They looked so ordinary that several council members felt embarrassed for them. "Very well," Commander Zektar announced. "You may send 5 fighters to compete in the annual tournament on Nexus Prime. The event begins in 6 months. As the humans prepared to leave, High Priestess Silandra called out to them. "Little mammals, why do you really want to do this? Surely you know you cannot win." Sarah Chen turned back to face the council. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something that made a few of the more observant aliens pause. "Because someone has to," she said quietly. After the humans left, the council chamber buzzed with excited conversation. This would be the most entertaining tournament in centuries. The humans would provide perfect warm-up matches for the real competitors. The crowd would love watching these soft creatures get crushed in the first round. Betting pools started immediately. Most aliens wagered on how quickly the humans would lose. The smart money said less than 30 seconds for each fight. Some optimistic bettors gave them a full minute. News of the human challenge spread across the galaxy faster than light. Species that had never shown interest in the tournament suddenly wanted tickets. This was going to be the funniest event in galactic history. The humans were so weak that some aliens suggested the tournament organizers provide them with weapons and armor just to make the fights last longer. Others worried that watching such a one-sided massacre might be boring. But a few beings across the galaxy felt something different when they heard the news. Something that might have been concern if they had understood what they were feeling. On the crystal homeworld of the Kitharans, old warriors who had fought in 100 battles found themselves thinking about the quiet way the human woman had spoken. There had been no fear in her voice, no doubt. Just calm certainty. In the poison gardens of the Vashti worlds, ancient priestesses remembered other species that had seemed weak at first glance. Most of those species were now extinct, but a few had surprised everyone. And in the energy fields where the luminals dwelt, some of the oldest beings recalled a truth that younger races had forgotten. Sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones that didn't look dangerous at all. But these thoughts were quickly pushed aside. The humans were obviously too weak to pose any real threat. The tournament would proceed as planned. The strong would fight the strong, as they always had. The humans would provide a brief moment of comic relief before the real battles began. At least, that's what everyone believed. 6 months later, as ships began gathering around Nexus Prime for the tournament, no one was laughing anymore about the human challenge, but not because they had changed their minds about human weakness. They had stopped laughing because deep down, something ancient and primal was starting to whisper a warning they didn't want to hear. The humans were coming. Nexus Prime looked like a jewel floating in space. The artificial world had been built specifically for the Galactic Combat Federation tournaments. Its surface was covered with massive arenas, training facilities, and accommodations for thousands of different alien species. Ships from across the galaxy filled the space around the planet. The bioships of the Kitharans pulsed with inner light, their crystal hulls reflecting starlight in rainbow patterns. The Vashti arrived in vessels that looked like giant serpents, their metal scales shifting and moving as if alive. The luminals came in ships made of pure energy that hurt to look at directly. Each arriving vessel was more impressive than the last. Some were the size of cities. Others seemed to bend space around them. A few existed in multiple dimensions at once. Then the human ship arrived. It was small, gray, and looked like it had been built in someone's garage. Next to the other vessels, it seemed like a child's toy. The ship's hull was made of simple metal plates welded together. Its engines produced normal fire instead of exotic energy. It had actual windows instead of quantum viewing portals. The alien crowds gathering to watch the tournament pointed and laughed when they saw it. Some beings took pictures to show their friends back home. The ship was so primitive that a few species thought it might be some kind of joke. When the human vessel docked at the main station, thousands of aliens pressed forward to get a better look. They wanted to see these creatures that had dared to challenge the greatest warriors in the galaxy. The airlock opened with a simple mechanical hiss. No dramatic energy effects. No clouds of mysterious gas. Just a basic door opening to reveal 5 humans standing in a plain metal corridor. Sarah Chen stepped out first. She wore simple dark clothing that looked like it came from a basic clothing store. Her only equipment was a small bag slung over her shoulder. She looked around at the crowd of aliens with calm interest as if she were touring a museum. Behind her came the other 4 human fighters. The young man who had seemed nervous before still bounced slightly on his feet, but his eyes were alert and focused. The older woman had stopped chewing, whatever she'd been eating, and now watched, the crowd with the steady gaze of someone who had seen many fights. The large, dark-skinned man smiled and waved at some of the alien children in the crowd. His friendly gesture made several alien parents pull their offspring behind them, though he seemed harmless enough. The small Asian woman moved like water, each step perfectly balanced. She appeared to be paying attention to everything and nothing at the same time, and at the back of the group came the scarred man with gray eyes. He didn't look around at the crowd or the impressive station. Instead, he studied the other competitor teams with the patient attention of someone reading a book. The humans looked so ordinary that many aliens felt embarrassed for them. They had no visible weapons beyond what looked like simple projectile devices. No armor except basic fabric clothing. No energy shields or exotic protection. They appeared to have brought nothing but themselves. Other competitor teams were already present at the station. The Kithran champion stood 8 feet tall, their crystal bodies reflecting light in patterns that hurt alien eyes to follow. Each movement they made sounded like mountains grinding together. The Vashti warriors coiled and uncoiled their serpent bodies, tasting the air with forked tongues. Poison dripped from their fangs and sizzled when it hit the floor. Station maintenance crews had to constantly clean up after them. The luminal fighters existed as beings of pure energy, contained in humanoid shapes. They flickered in and out of visible existence, sometimes becoming transparent, sometimes blazing so bright that other aliens had to look away. Each competing species had brought their finest warriors. The Garanthians displayed their thick armor plating and massive claws. The ethereal collective floated in the air, their tentacles weaving complex patterns that altered reality around them. The void dancers moved through shadows, appearing and disappearing at will. When these teams saw the humans, their reactions ranged from confusion to amusement to outright dismissal. The Kitharan champion Thaktar looked down at the humans with his multifaceted crystal eyes. "These are your fighters?" he asked Sarah Chen, his voice sounding like breaking glass. "They appear to be civilians," Sarah nodded politely. "They are our best." Cecilex, the Vashti warrior, slithered closer. Her poison fangs dripped as she spoke. "Little mammals, you should leave now while you still can. My venom can kill a creature 20 times your size in seconds." The human woman called Rodriguez looked up at the giant snake alien and smiled. "That's nice, dear. Is there somewhere we can get some food around here?" "I'm starving." Her casual response seemed to confuse Cecilex, who had expected fear or at least respect. Bright death dancing, the luminal entity, materialized in front of the human group. Its energy form pulsed with dangerous light. "Soft creatures, you should know that I can phase through your bodies and stop your hearts from within. Why do you not flee?" The young human man, Marcus, studied the energy being with obvious interest. "That's a really cool ability. How does the energy manipulation work? Do you convert matter to energy, or are you naturally incorporeal?" Bright death dancing flickered in what might have been surprise. Most beings cowered when faced with luminal power. This human was asking technical questions like he was attending a science lecture. The large human man, Okafor, approached a group of Garanthian warriors. These aliens stood 9 feet tall with armor plating that could stop starship weapons. Their claws could tear through solid steel. "Wow, you guys are impressive," Okafor said with genuine enthusiasm. "That armor looks incredibly effective. Is it biological or artificial? And those claws, the engineering on those joints must be amazing." The Garanthians looked at each other in confusion. They were used to inspiring terror, not scientific curiosity. Only the human called Jackson remained quiet. He stood apart from the others, watching and listening to everything. His gray eyes tracked the movements of each alien species, noting their strengths, their weaknesses, their fighting styles. Several alien veterans found themselves uncomfortable under his gaze. There was something in the way he watched them that reminded them of being studied by a predator. But that was impossible. Humans were obviously prey animals. Station staff directed all the teams to their quarters. The alien competitors were given luxury accommodations suited to their species' needs. Crystal-growing chambers for the Kitharans, poison-resistant environments for the Vashti, energy-feeding stations for the Luminals. The humans were assigned basic rooms with simple beds and standard life support. They didn't complain about the basic accommodations. In fact, they seemed pleased with anything that had running water and artificial gravity. As news of the human arrival spread through the station, crowds gathered to stare at them. Most aliens had never seen such primitive-looking sentience before. They took pictures and made jokes about how quickly the tournament would end. Betting pools updated their odds. The smart money was now on the humans, lasting less than 15 seconds in their first fights. Some optimistic gamblers were betting on 30 seconds, but everyone agreed that was probably too generous. Representatives from Galactic News Network set up cameras to record what was expected to be the shortest tournament matches in Federation history. They planned to sell the footage as comedy entertainment. But a few beings on the station began to notice strange things about the humans. They never seemed to sleep all at once. Someone was always awake, always watching. They ate everything the station cafeteria served without complaint, including foods that were considered barely edible by most species. They exercised constantly, but not in the dramatic way of other competitors. Instead, they performed simple, repetitive movements that seemed to serve no obvious purpose, and they asked questions. Endless questions about the station, the tournament rules, the other species, the local gravity, the atmospheric composition, everything. Most disturbing of all, they never seemed afraid. Even when faced with beings that could kill them instantly, they remained calm and curious. A few veteran warriors found this behavior troubling, though they couldn't explain why. Something about the humans' reaction, or lack of reaction, to overwhelming force made old instincts stir uneasily. But these concerns were quickly dismissed. The humans were obviously too weak to be dangerous. Tomorrow the tournament would begin, and these soft creatures would learn what real combat looked like. The galaxy was ready for the most entertaining tournament in centuries. What they got instead was about to change everything they thought they knew about warfare. The main arena on Nexus Prime could hold 500,000 spectators. Every seat was filled as beings from across the galaxy gathered to watch the tournament begin. The arena floor was made from quantum-bonded materials that could withstand weapons capable of destroying moons. Energy shields protected the crowd from the violence below. The preliminary rounds were designed to remove the weakest competitors before the real fighting began. Most years, these early matches were quick and brutal. Stronger species eliminated weaker ones in seconds, clearing the field for the true champions. This year, everyone expected the preliminary rounds to be over very quickly. The humans would provide a few minutes of entertainment before being crushed, and then the serious competition could begin. Tournament director Velkan, a towering insectoid with 4 arms and compound eyes, stood at the center of the arena. His voice boomed through speakers that translated his words into 1,000 different languages. Citizens of the galaxy, welcome to the 3,000th annual Galactic Combat Federation tournament. The crowd roared its approval. Today we witness combat between the greatest warriors of known space. The camera feeds focused on the champion teams. The Kitharans stood like living statues, their crystal bodies reflecting arena lights in dazzling patterns. The Vashti coiled and uncoiled, poison dripping from their fangs. The luminals flickered between dimensions, barely visible one moment, blazing with energy the next. And in a first for Federation history, Velkan continued, we welcome a new species to our ranks. The humans of Earth have requested to join our brotherhood of warriors. The camera found the human team sitting quietly in their preparation area. They looked so ordinary compared to the other competitors that several alien commentators started laughing on live broadcasts. The humans will face the Zilani Collective in the first preliminary match, Velkan announced. A nervous hush fell over parts of the crowd. The Zilani were not the strongest species in the tournament, but they were far from the weakest. They were a hive mind race whose warriors shared consciousness. When one Zilani learned something, they all knew it instantly. They could predict each other's movements perfectly and coordinate attacks with impossible precision. The Zilani had never lost a preliminary round. 5 Zilani warriors entered the arena. They moved like liquid metal given shape, their silvery bodies flowing and shifting as they walked. Each stood 7 feet tall with blade arms that could cut through steel. Their shared consciousness allowed them to function as a single organism with 5 bodies. The human team entered from the opposite side. Jackson led the way, his gray eyes scanning the arena with calm attention. Behind him came Marcus, Rodriguez, Okafor, and Tanaka. They wore simple protective gear that looked like it came from a basic sporting goods store. The contrast was so stark that many aliens felt embarrassed for the humans. Combatants, prepare for battle, Velkan announced. The Zilani warriors immediately spread out in a perfect formation, their shared mind calculating optimal attack patterns. They had fought as a collective for over 2 centuries. No individual warrior had ever defeated them. The humans did something unexpected. Instead of spreading out or taking defensive positions, they moved closer together. Jackson said something quietly to his team. Whatever he told them made them all nod. Begin. The first Zilani warrior attacked Jackson with impossible speed. Its blade arm swept toward his head in an arc that should have decapitated him instantly. The crowd began to cheer, expecting to see first blood. Jackson wasn't there. He had moved just enough to let the blade pass by his face. As the Zilani warrior's momentum carried it forward, Jackson's counterattack was simple and devastating. He grabbed the alien's extended arm and used its own speed against it, sending the warrior crashing into the arena wall. The crowd fell silent. The second Zilani attacked immediately, its hive mind adjusting tactics based on what the first warrior had learned. But humans, it turned out, could adjust faster. Rodriguez faced the second warrior with a style that confused everyone watching. She seemed to absorb hits that should have crippled her, rolling with impacts that would have shattered the bones of most species. When the Zilani warrior overextended trying to land a killing blow, Rodriguez exploded into violence. Her counterattack was brutal and efficient. She fought like someone who had learned combat in places where losing meant dying. The Zilani warrior found itself outmaneuvered by an opponent who should have been overwhelmed. The third and fourth Zilani attacked together, their shared consciousness coordinating a pincer movement that had never failed. Okafor and Tanaka met them in the center of the arena. Okafor fought with surprising grace for such a large man. He moved like a dancer, but every movement had purpose. When a blade arm came at him, he wasn't where it expected to find him. When he struck back, his blows landed with scientific precision on points that disrupted the Zilani's fluid movement. Tanaka was even more confusing to watch. She seemed to fight not just the visible opponent, but spaces where the alien might move. Her attacks anticipated the Zilani's reactions, striking at weaknesses before they fully appeared. The fifth Zilani warrior faced Marcus. The young human had seemed nervous and uncertain before the match. Now he moved with cold calculation. He had been watching Zilani combat techniques since arriving at the station. He understood their movement patterns, their attack preferences, their defensive reflexes. More importantly, he had figured out how to disrupt them. Marcus carried a simple tool that looked like a maintenance device. When the Zilani warrior attacked, he activated it. The tool produced a high-frequency vibration that interfered with the alien's shape-shifting ability. For the first time in centuries, a Zilani warrior found itself locked in solid form. Marcus's follow-up attack was devastating. The arena had fallen completely silent. 5 Zilani warriors lay unconscious on the arena floor. 5 humans stood over them, bloodied but victorious. The crowd stared in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Zilani collective had never lost a preliminary round. They were coordinated, experienced, and deadly. But they had just been defeated by 5 soft mammals from a backwater planet. In the competitor viewing areas, the champion teams were no longer laughing. Commander Zektar leaned forward in his crystal chair, his 4 eyes focused intently on the human team. How did they move so efficiently? He asked his advisors. Their speed was not superior. Their strength was adequate but not overwhelming. Yet they won. High Priestess Silandra tasted the air with her forked tongue. They fought as if they knew what the Zilani would do before the Zilani knew it themselves. Bright death dancing pulsed with uncertain energy. They adapted. I observed them learning during the combat. Each exchange taught them something new about their opponents. In the arena, medics were helping the defeated Zilani warriors to their feet. The aliens were conscious but confused. Their shared hive mind had never encountered fighters who could predict and counter their coordination so effectively. The human team regrouped in the center of the arena. They showed no celebration, no victory displays. Jackson checked on his teammates, making sure they were ready for whatever came next. Tournament Director Velkon's voice echoed through the silent arena. The winners of the first preliminary round, Team Human. Scattered applause began in some sections of the crowd, but it was confused and uncertain. No one understood what they had just witnessed. In broadcast booths around the galaxy, alien commentators struggled to explain what had happened. The humans had won, but not through superior strength or exotic abilities. They had won through something the galaxy had rarely seen in individual combat: pure tactical adaptation. Ladies and gentlemen, One Kitharan broadcaster said slowly. I believe we may have underestimated these humans. The betting pools went crazy. Odds on human survival jumped from impossible to merely unlikely. Some gamblers started placing bets on the humans advancing to the second round. But in the quiet competitor areas, veteran warriors were thinking about more serious concerns. The humans hadn't just won, they had won by learning their opponent's weaknesses in real time. That was something none of the champion species had encountered before. As the human team left the arena, Jackson caught the eyes of several champion warriors watching from above. His expression was calm and patient. He looked like someone who was just getting started. The preliminary rounds continued, but the galaxy's attention had shifted. These humans were no longer a joke. They were becoming something much more dangerous, an unknown quantity in a tournament where everyone thought they knew all the variables. And unknown quantities, as any veteran warrior could tell you, were the most dangerous opponents of all. The tournament had reached the quarterfinals and the galaxy was no longer laughing. What had started as entertainment was becoming something that made veteran warriors uncomfortable. The humans had advanced through each round not by overwhelming their opponents but by doing something far more disturbing. They never stopped learning. Each match taught them something new. Each victory came not from brute force but from understanding their enemies better than their enemies understood themselves. It was a kind of warfare that the galaxy had never encountered before. Commander Zektar of the Kitharans stood in his preparation chamber, his crystal body reflecting light in sharp patterns. For the first time in a century, he felt something he had almost forgotten: uncertainty. His advisors surrounded him, their voices echoing like breaking glass as they spoke in rapid Kitharan. The humans have studied our previous matches, one advisor reported. They have recorded footage of every Kitharan victory for the past 50 years. Impossible, Zektar replied. Our crystal armor has never been breached. Our strength has never been matched. What could they learn that would matter? They brought tools, another advisor said quietly. Simple devices, but they seemed designed specifically to counter our advantages. Zektar's 4 eyes focused on the advisor. What kind of tools? Resonance hammers, vibration devices, equipment that produces specific frequencies. The advisor paused. Frequencies that match the natural harmonic resonance of our crystal matrix. For the first time in decades, Zektar felt cold. Across the station, High Priestess Silandra coiled in her poison-proof chamber. Her forked tongue tasted the air again and again, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My venom has killed creatures from 12 different species, she hissed to her attendants. No biological organism has ever survived a full dose. The human Tanaka has been observed taking small doses of various toxins, one attendant reported. Station Medical detected trace amounts of Vashti poison in her blood samples. Silandra's scales rippled in shock. That is impossible. Even a drop of our venom should be instantly fatal to such a fragile creature. Unless, the attendant said carefully, she has been building immunity over time. The idea was insane. Building immunity to Vashti poison required exposing oneself to agonizing doses over months or years. Most beings would die from the pain alone. The fact that a human had deliberately poisoned herself to prepare for this tournament spoke to a level of preparation that was almost frightening. In the energy chambers where the luminals dwelt, bright death dancing pulsed with uncertain light. The human Rodriguez had done something during their preliminary match that still confused. The energy being. She had fought empty spaces, while other opponents focused on bright death dancing's visible form. Rodriguez had attacked areas where the entity might materialize. She seemed to understand that luminals existed partially outside normal space-time, and had somehow predicted where the energy being would appear next. How could a primitive biological creature understand trans-dimensional combat? Bright death dancing asked the other luminals. Perhaps, another energy being replied. They are not as primitive as we assumed. The quarter-final matches began with the arena packed beyond capacity. Word had spread across the galaxy that something unprecedented was happening. Species that had never shown interest in combat sports were now watching to see if the impossible might actually occur. The first match was between Marcus and Thaktar, the Kitharan champion. Thaktar had never lost a fight. His crystal armor had turned aside weapons that could level cities. His strength could crush steel girders into powder. Marcus looked tiny standing across from the 8-foot crystal giant. He carried what appeared to be a simple tool belt with basic maintenance equipment. The crowd expected this to be the shortest fight of the tournament. Thaktar attacked with devastating force. His crystal fists moved like meteors, each punch carrying enough power to shatter mountains. But Marcus wasn't trying to match that strength. Instead, he activated his resonance hammer. The device produced a specific vibration frequency that Marcus had calculated after studying hours of Kitharan combat footage. The sound wave penetrated Thaktar's crystal matrix and began to resonate at its natural harmonic frequency. Cracks appeared in the Kitharan's armor. For the first time in his life, Thaktar felt pain. His supposedly unbreakable crystal body was vibrating apart from the inside. Marcus followed up with precise strikes to the stress points where the resonance had weakened the crystal structure. In less than 3 minutes, the undefeated Kitharan champion was on his knees, his armor shattered, his forearms unable to continue fighting. The arena fell silent except for the sound of crystal fragments hitting the floor. The second quarterfinal match was between Tanaka and Sislex, the Vashti warrior. The giant serpent alien slithered into the arena, confident that one bite would end the fight instantly. Sislex struck with impossible speed, her fangs sinking deep into Tanaka's shoulder. Venom that could kill a starship crew in seconds flowed into the human's bloodstream. Tanaka didn't fall. She didn't even seem particularly bothered. Instead, she grabbed the Vashti's head while the fangs were still embedded in her shoulder and began applying pressure to specific nerve clusters. Sislex found herself paralyzed by a creature that should have been dead from poison. How? Sislex managed to hiss as her consciousness faded. Tanaka's answer was simple. Practice. The third match was between Rodriguez and Bright Death dancing. The luminal entity materialized in the center of the arena, its energy form blazing with power. Rodriguez did something that confused everyone watching. She closed her eyes. Bright Death dancing attacked from multiple angles, phasing in and out of visible existence. But Rodriguez fought as if she could see the energy being even when it was invisible. Her strikes landed on empty air that suddenly blazed with luminal energy, as the entity materialized exactly where she had aimed. "You're fighting the wrong opponent," Rodriguez said calmly. "You're trying to confuse my eyes. But humans don't just hunt with vision." She was tracking the luminol through electromagnetic disturbances, air pressure changes, and a dozen other subtle environmental cues that most species couldn't even perceive. Bright Death dancing found itself outmaneuvered by a creature that was somehow predicting its trans-dimensional movements. The final quarterfinal match was between Okafor and the Ethereal Collective's champion, a being that could alter reality within a limited area around itself. The alien twisted space and time, making attacks curve around it while launching strikes that defied physics. Okafor studied the reality distortions for several minutes, taking hits while he observed the patterns. Then he began to move in ways that made no sense to observers. He was fighting the spaces between the distorted reality, finding the tiny gaps where normal physics still applied. Every time the ethereal champion tried to warp space around Okafor, the human had already moved to a position where the distortion couldn't reach him. When the 4 matches ended, 4 humans stood victorious in the arena. 4 champion species that had dominated the galaxy for centuries lay defeated. The crowd was completely silent. This wasn't supposed to be possible. In the competitor areas, the remaining alien champions looked at each other with something approaching fear. These humans hadn't won through luck or superior technology. They had won by understanding their opponent's abilities better than the aliens understood them themselves. Tournament Director Velkan's voice echoed through the arena. But for the first time in his career, he seemed uncertain. "The semi-final matches will begin tomorrow," he announced. "The human team will face all remaining competitors simultaneously." This was unprecedented. The tournament rules had never required one team to face multiple opponents. But the remaining alien champions had demanded it. They were no longer confident they could defeat the humans individually. As the human team left the arena, Jackson looked up at the observation boxes where alien leaders sat in shocked silence. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "they'll learn what we really came here to do." Sarah Chen, watching from the human team's viewing area, smiled for the first time since arriving at Nexus. Prime, the galaxy was about to discover why humans had never encountered a predator they couldn't eventually hunt, and why the strongest fighters who challenged them were never Heard from again, because humans didn't just fight their opponents, they fought the concepts that made their opponents strong, and concepts, once broken, could never be put back together. The arena had never seen anything like it. What was supposed to be the championship match had become something else entirely. The remaining alien champions from 7 different species stood together on one side of the arena floor. On the other side stood 5 humans. The betting pools had closed. No one wanted to take odds on what was about to happen. In the viewing boxes, alien leaders from across the galaxy watched in tense silence. This had stopped being a tournament and had become something that might change the balance of power in known space. Jackson stood at the front of the human team, his gray eyes scanning the 7 alien champions arrayed against them. These were beings who could shatter planets, manipulate time, and command forces that defied physics. Any one of them should have been able to defeat all 5 humans without effort, but the humans had already proven that should have meant nothing. The alien champions included Commander Zektar of the Kitharans, though his crystal armor was now reinforced with new harmonic dampeners. High Priestess Silandra of the Vashti had brought antidotes to her own venom, just in case. Bright death dancing flickered uncertainly, no longer confident in dimensional superiority. Joining them were the Garanthian War Master, whose armor plating had never been penetrated, the Void Dancer champion, who could step between shadows and strike from nothingness, the Ethereal Collective's reality bender, who twisted space itself as a weapon, and the massive Titan-class warrior from the Forge Worlds, a mechanical being designed specifically for combat. 7 champions, 7 different ways to kill, 7 species that had conquered star systems through pure martial superiority, against 5 humans with basic equipment and an attitude that made veteran warriors nervous. Tournament Director Velkan raised his forearms for silence. The arena was so quiet that the hum of the energy shields protecting the crowd seemed loud. This match will determine the new leadership of the Galactic Combat Federation, he announced. There are no rules except survival. The match ends when only one side remains standing. He paused, looking down at the 2 groups facing each other. Begin. The alien champions attacked as one coordinated force. 7 different forms of devastation converged on the human position from multiple angles. Energy blasts, dimensional rifts, reality distortions, and physical attacks that could level buildings all struck the same spot. The dust cloud from the impacts obscured the arena floor. The crowd leaned forward, expecting to see 5 human-shaped smears on the quantum-bonded surface. When the dust cleared, the humans were gone. They hadn't been vaporized. They had simply moved. Jackson's voice echoed from somewhere in the arena. Rule 1 of human combat. Don't be where the enemy expects you to be. The humans had scattered in 5 different directions the instant the match began. But this wasn't random movement. They had studied their opponents for days, learning movement patterns, attack preferences, and reaction times. Marcus appeared behind the Titan-class warrior, carrying what looked like a simple cutting tool. But he had modified it based on his analysis of Forge World engineering. The device produced a specific, electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the mechanical being's neural networks. The supposedly unstoppable war machine stumbled and fell as its own systems turned against. Rodriguez materialized next to the Ethereal Collective champion. The alien tried to warp reality around her, but Rodriguez was no longer where the distortion field expected to find her. She moved through the twisted space like someone who had spent months learning to navigate impossible geometry. Her attack struck the Ethereal champion in the one spot where its reality manipulation couldn't protect it, the quantum anchor point that kept it stable in normal space-time. Tanaka faced the Void Dancer, a being that could step between shadows and attack from nothingness. But humans, it turned out, had their own relationship with darkness. Tanaka moved like someone who had learned to hunt in complete blackness, tracking her opponent through senses the alien didn't know existed. When the Void Dancer emerged from shadow to strike, Tanaka was waiting. Okafor engaged the Garanthian War Master, whose armor plating had never been penetrated by any weapon. But Okafor wasn't trying to penetrate the armor. Instead, he was systematically overloading the alien sensory systems with precisely calibrated impacts that turned the Garanthian's own defensive systems against it. The War Master found itself blinded and deafened by its own protection mechanisms that left Jackson facing 3 opponents simultaneously: Commander Zektar, High Priestess Silandra, and Bright Death Dancing, 3 champions who represented the pinnacle of galactic combat evolution. Jackson didn't try to fight them individually. Instead, he did something that made the watching crowd gasp in understanding. He used them against each other. When Zektar charged with his massive crystal fists, Jackson moved just enough that the Catharan's attack passed through the space where Bright Death Dancing was materializing. The energy being's quantum structure was disrupted by the Crystal Warrior's harmonic resonance. When Silandra struck with venomous fangs, Jackson guided her attack into Zektar's path. The Catharan's new armor was designed to resist resonance attacks, but it had no protection against Vashti poison. In less than 10 minutes, 7 champions who had ruled the galaxy for centuries lay unconscious on the arena floor. 5 humans stood over them, bloodied but victorious. The arena was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, Sarah Chen walked onto the arena floor. She moved to the center where her team waited, and turned to address the 500,000 beings watching from the stands. Her voice carried clearly through the arena's amplification system as she spoke to the galaxy. "You wondered how we could be so confident despite our obvious weakness," she said. "You assumed we didn't understand what we faced. But we understood perfectly." She gestured to the unconscious champions around her team. "Every species in this galaxy became apex predators by dominating their environments. You grew strong by having strength. You grew fast by needing speed. You developed exotic abilities because your worlds demanded them." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "Humans became apex predators differently. We became the species that never stopped trying to kill what was trying to kill us. We didn't evolve overwhelming strength. We evolved overwhelming persistence. We didn't develop perfect defenses. We developed perfect adaptation." She looked up at the alien leaders in their viewing boxes. "When we couldn't outrun our predators, we learned to outlast them. When we couldn't outfight our environment, we learned to outthink it. When we faced problems we couldn't solve with existing tools, we made new tools." The arena remained completely silent as her words echoed. "Your champions were individuals fighting other individuals. Our fighters represent 4 billion years of evolution dedicated to a single principle: never give up, never stop learning, and never stop fighting." Sarah's voice carried to every corner of the arena and to broadcast receivers across the galaxy. "You sent your strongest warriors to face us, expecting easy victory, but you weren't fighting 5 humans. You were fighting the living embodiment of evolutionary stubbornness. You were fighting a species that has never encountered a problem we couldn't eventually solve. Never faced a predator we couldn't eventually hunt. Never met a challenge we couldn't eventually overcome." She paused, looking around at the massive crowd. "Your champions fought bravely, but they were fighting representatives of a species that spent millions of years learning to hunt things bigger, stronger, faster, and more dangerous than ourselves. They were fighting the children of a world where everything evolved to kill us, and we evolved to kill it back." Sarah Chen's final words rang through the arena like a bell. This is what made humans truly dangerous. Not our strength, but our absolute inability to accept defeat as permanent. We don't just fight our enemies. We fight the concepts that make our enemies strong. And once we break those concepts, they can never be put back together. The human team departed Nexus Prime that day as the new rulers of the Galactic Combat Federation. But something strange happened in the weeks that followed. Challenges to human authority simply stopped coming. Species that had proudly sent warriors to the tournament for millennia quietly withdrew from competition. The galaxy's greatest fighters didn't challenge the new champions. They just disappeared from the tournament rosters entirely, because the galaxy had finally learned something that changed everything. The humans hadn't just won a tournament. They had demonstrated something that made every warrior species reconsider the very nature of conflict. They had proven that the most dangerous predator wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the most exotic. It was the one that never stopped adapting, never stopped learning, and never accepted that any fight was truly over. The galaxy's strongest fighters had challenged humans and discovered they weren't fighting individuals. They were fighting evolution itself, given form and purpose and an absolutely unbreakable will to survive. And that was a fight no one was prepared to continue. The tournament continued in subsequent years, but the humans rarely had to fight. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about what they represented, not just warriors, but the ultimate expression of biological stubbornness, the species that had spent 4 billion years learning to hunt everything that tried to hunt them.